So check it out. A tiny bank in Oklahoma, the one behind me, First National Bank of Lindsay, just showed us what happens next when your bank account goes to zero and nobody noticed. Researchers at FAU and the FDIC have been warning about this for months. Here, let me walk you through what's going on. Right now, a lot of banks in the United States are sitting around $480 billion of losses on their bond and mortgage piles. Losses they haven't actually taken yet. The little insurance pool that's supposed to backstop deposits, the FDIC fund, only has about $150 billion in it. And we already saw a tiny little bank in Oklahoma, the one behind me, go under, where people with more than 250 grand were told, hey man, you might not get all of this back. That's the Lindsay case. Small town bank, October 2024. People over the FDIC limit got half their extra money right away, and the rest, well, maybe later, maybe not. It all depends on what the bank's assets sold for. So there are no big headlines there, no panic on TV, but the rule was clear. Over 250, you're not protected in the same way. So here's the part that messes with people. So the way the law is written, your deposit is not in a little box in a vault with your name on it. Once you put it in the bank, the money legally belongs to the bank. You get a promise on a screen. That's it. It's essentially a digital IOU. You're lending to a leveraged business that's hoping everyone doesn't ask for their money back at the same time. So the easiest way to picture this is simple. Think back at your high school cafeteria, like right behind me. Remember back to that Adam Sandler song, Lunch Lady Land? Chris Farley being the lunch lady? It's a little bit like this. So you hand the lunch lady, you hand Chris Farley $20. You assume she puts it in an envelope with your name on it. But guess what? She's not doing that. She throws it into one big bucket, then spends most of it on food, trays, and equipment. The computer still says, hey, you got $20 in there, but the actual bill is already out and working. And if enough kids show up and go to the lunch lady, hey, we all want our money back right now, the cafeteria simply doesn't have the cash. Now imagine a tiny emergency pizza fund in the office. That's the FDIC. Sure, it can cover a few screw-ups, can't cover the same kid wanting the same $20 back on the same day at the same time. And that's your bank, just with bigger numbers and nicer suits. That is what is called fractional reserve banking. So here's what shifts because of that. You can't treat a big bank balance as safe money in a box anymore. You've got to see it for what it is, the unsecured loan you're giving to that bank. Anything over the insurance limit at any one bank is now a real credit decision. Same as if you were lending to a buddy's business. So you have to start acting like a lender. Tonight, I want you to do 3 quick things. 1, list every bank and every balance you have. 2, mark what's under the FDIC limit of $250,000. Then mark what's over it. 3, pick one chunk of over-the-line money and move it into something with real collateral behind it, a real asset. That's step 1. You can spread extra cash across a couple of solid banks. You could park some in short-term treasuries or conservative money funds you actually understand. And you can start moving meaningful chunks into real assets the bank can't just spend. Properties, businesses, properly structured policies, things tied to the real world. If you're under the insurance limit, life probably doesn't change much. Once you're above that line, you've quietly moved into a shock absorber category ahead of the taxpayer. Now, here's the part most people never hear. Regulators are not trying to make the system risk-free. They're trying to keep the confidence high enough that people don't all sprint for the exits at once. Banks are also built so that there's always less cash in the vault than promises on the screen. That's not a bug. That's the business model. After 2008, the rules shifted so that in the next crisis, losses should hit shareholders, bondholders, and then the bigger depositors before taxpayers. And we saw this in real life. When Silicon Valley Bank blew up, they bent the rules and protected big uninsured deposits because the fear was contagious and the numbers were huge. When that little bank in Oklahoma failed, they followed the textbooks. Insured folks were fine. Uninsured folks sat in the loss bucket because the bank wasn't scary enough to save. So how protected you are isn't just about what the law says. It's also about how dangerous your failure would be for the rest of the system. That's the game you're actually in. Now, different people look at this and they see very different things. Regulators will tell you with a straight face, the system is sound, profits are up, capital and liquidity are solid. Risk people look at the mix of big paper losses and lots of uninsured deposits and go, yeah, some of these banks are one ugly headline away from a run. Think tank folks actually like the Lindsay case because it looks like a healthy, boring bank failure where uninsured savers are fine and bigger depositors finally feel some risk again. Then you got the doom and gloom gold crowd pointing at the same numbers saying, bail-ins are coming, pull everything out of the banks right now. So who's right? And you don't have to pick a religion here. You just have to watch what actually happens in the next mid-sized bank failure. Who takes the loss? Who gets protected, and how fast do they move? So here's the angle almost no one is tracking yet. Those unrealized losses are still high, even if they've come down from its peak. And guess what? They don't vanish just because rates drift a little lower. Regulators have quietly dialed back how much they say about specific problem banks, which gives you less visibility, not more. Uninsured deposits are starting to creep back up as people chase convenience and a little extra yield again. So the dry kindling for another last digital run is quietly piling up in the corner. In the background, the policy fight is shifting from never let depositors lose to exactly who should we protect. That makes the line between insured, uninsured, and too important to fail more political every year. If you're not watching these signals, you're basically driving at night with your headlights off. So if you zoom out, here's how the big players think. They don't treat a huge bank balance like a security blanket. They treat it as short-term fuel that just happens to sit in a bank because it needs to move fast. They're going to spread their exposure across banks, across entities, and sometimes across countries. They keep real reserves inside structures with collateral and control. Property, operating companies, properly set up policies. They've already accepted that the rulebook is written so that large depositors can be tapped before taxpayers. So they design their life so they're never going to be an easy target for the bottom of that waterfall. And for what it's worth, I don't keep a giant pile of cash sitting in one bank either. I spread it out and I push as much as I can into boring stuff with real bricks and mortar behind it. So let's bring this home. Instead of parking everything in one convenient account and calling it a day, you use that account for what it really is, working capital to move in and out. Then you move the extra into things with collateral and tax advantages that don't need your daily attention. And one of the great places to move these are into boring rentals, boring deals, boring structures that quietly send you checks and cut your tax bill. Your bank is a tool, not a vault. And your job isn't to panic. It's to quietly set things up so that you're never the one finding out the hard way which version of the rulebook gets used next. Once you see it that way, the real question gets pretty simple. If you stop leaving big chunks of money sitting there as digital IOUs, what do you trade them for that throws off practical cash flow, gives you real tax benefits, and doesn't turn into a second job? This is where real estate comes in. Not swing the hammer on the weekends and take tenant calls at midnight version that turns into just brain damage. Look, I pulled another breakdown that walks through how to turn this exact idea into a boring but automated real estate plan. You'll see how we use systems and boots on the ground so that you own the property. You get all the tax benefits, all the appreciation, and you still keep your calendar under control because you're not doing all the work. So if you're that busy doctor, dentist, or professional who wants the asset but not another job, that one that's built with you in mind, start there next, and you'll see how everything we just talked about turns from a banking problem into a simple, repeatable playbook.